Hello everyone and welcome back to more Nomifactory, where today we're going to be picking up where we left off. Now of course, if you remember, we left off just about to get LV machines, but unfortunately we didn't have all the resources in order to create them. Well, after around an hour, we've got quite a few resources, though of course I forgot to mine tin, so we're just gonna hope that the recipes don't call for a lot of tin when making our LV machines. In order to use the LV machines though, we need to convert this RF power into EU power. RF stands for redstone flux and EU stands for energy units, but it's pretty arbitrary. All you really need to know is that RF converts into EU at a 4:1 ratio, so 4 RF makes 1 EU. Which is important because that means this machine right here, its 40 RF a tick, is only really making 10 EU a tick. So something important to keep in mind is that 10 EU a tick is not even enough for one LV machine. So Cooper nickel, which is in the alloy smelter, is 16 EU a tick, which is like all LV machines are 16 a tick, which means this one steam dynamo is not even enough for one machine. Although of course that's going to be a problem for future me, and what we're going to do in the meantime is finally get our CEF crafted and some conductive iron cables. So something important to keep in mind when making cables is that normally, like with the lower tier cables, you can just make them in your crafting interface like this. The issue is, if you try to make 4x, it won't let you. You can only do it for 1x wire. If you want to do it for 4x, 2x, or anything more than that, you have to do it in an assembler. There's no other way. And now of course that's important because if we want to turn these 4x wires into cables here, we have to turn all of them back into their base components here, and we had 16 in order to get that. You make all of these into cables, and then you combine them up to get to your 4x like normal, and that's how you get the quest. So now with our CEF, we can finally place it down on the ground and have our wire set up. So basically how this works is every single face except for this red dot one here. This is the side that outputs energy, every other side accepts energy. So that's why we pipe the RF into here, and then it gets outputted through these conductive cables. The reason as to why you want cables instead of just wires is because wires will hurt you, cables don't. Well, with the important distinction that electricity is flowing through the wires, otherwise it won't actually hurt you. Like if I just place this on the ground, it doesn't hurt me. So something important to keep in mind with GregTech power is that you've got the actual power buffer itself and then another thing called amperage. So what amperage is it's basically the maximum amount of machines that can be running at the same time on one cable. So that's why you see in the top left there, it says 4x conductive iron cable. That's because it can only run up to 4 amps of machinery at a time. Something incredibly important as well to keep in mind is that these battery slots here dictate how many amps are running through your cable. So if you have one battery, it'll be 1 amp, with 4 batteries being 4 amps. Though, interestingly, if you leave it completely empty, you can have all 4 amps running at the same time. Just the only downside is you don't actually get a power buffer, so you basically need more instant direct power as opposed to something built up over time. Now that we've got all of that knocked out of the way, we can pretty much just claim these next quests or just get straight through them to see what's next. The important thing about these 2 quests is it explains to you how to go through power and all that and what you should be doing. But we're going to be ignoring that and instead just going straight to the next thing, which is the wire mill. Now in order to craft a wire mill, you're going to need electric motors and then more circuits as well. So this is the main point at which batch crafting is going to be your best friend and why it's incredibly important to get a lot of resources. So in order to create motors here, we need to get a lot of wires, rods, and cables. Which, as you can probably figure, is pretty expensive, and that's why especially the wire mill is incredibly important, because it makes it so that getting your wires is way cheaper. So normally the ratio for resource to wire is actually 2 to 1, but once you get the wire mill, it goes from 1 to 2. And not only that, but with copper wires as well for like electric motors and your vacuum tubes and everything, you can put it back through the wire mill again and you get fine copper wire. So you get from 1 to 8 practically, because you get 2 wires. So now you're getting 8 fine copper wire, which allows you to make 2 electric motors off of that alone. Just before we get started, I'm going to make sure to add another sign on the end here for motors, and we're going to make sure to specify LV, even though we probably won't have MV for a while. And that's just because you need different motors for your MV. Well, at this point, the only thing left to do is start getting crafting. Alright, and with that, we finally have all of the components for our wire. Well, almost all of the components. We just need to make the machine whole. And now we've got all of the components for our wire mill. And the quest. Unfortunately, I really didn't get to batchcraft nearly as much as I was hoping to, but we get our first machine down. So similar to a CEF, a wire mill works by having every side as an input for energy or items. And then you have one side designated as your output, but you have to manually set that with a wrench. So what we're going to do is we're going to have an output to the bottom, and we're going to make sure to click the orange box here, because that's your auto output. If that's not set, it will not automatically output. And we're going to put it the crate directly below it. And of course, if we want to not die here, what we need to get is a slab, so that way we can still access the crate but not get killed. And I could have it output above, but I would rather have that be where I have a storage buffer. So essentially what's going to happen is there's going to be a hopper and then another crate above it, so that way we can more than easily filter in a bunch and then export to the bottom. Now that we have the wire mill completed though, making the components for the next machines like the compressor, alloy smelter, and so on is definitely going to be a lot easier. I think for now though, I should really try to batchcraft a lot more resources. There are quite a few machines to progress through today. Are you actually kidding me? Oh, it doesn't actually kill me. Oh, that's sick. Well, I'm gonna die anyways, but that is so fucked. Oh, okay, I don't die. Are you actually kidding me? I did it again, but this time it wasn't even... Oh my god. Okay, well, I was going to leave the power problems to future me, but it is already becoming a problem, so... Before we can start the batch crafting for the machines, looks like we've got to take a quick detour to get some more steam dynamos. Okay, after taking a minute to look at this, I've redesigned the setup so that way we have all 3 of these steam dynamos here being fueled, and it fuels it pretty much similar to the furnaces, having it go all the way over to the side and then fueling the hoppers slowly. And then in order to get the water from the one source to the other 2, we just use these pressurized fluid conduits to just extract and insert into the dynamos. So thankfully, with that out of the way, we can finally connect this up and actually have our wire mill process, right? Hopefully? Okay, so from the looks of things, the water is slowly filling up more than it's actually being consumed in this dynamo, so after quite some time, this should finally fill up enough that we can actually, get enough power. Well, with all of that crafting out of the way, we can finally make two new machines, that of course being the alloy smelter and the mixer. So we're going to place these two machines right here and here, just next to the mixer, not mixer, the wire mill. And we're going to place the crates and everything below, but we're not going to place any hoppers or craft anymore above, because I kind of forgot that with the wire mill, actually no, I don't even think we can make it with just the wire mill, but we should be able to make item conduits now, which are better than hoppers. The reason why we couldn't make this before is because we needed the wire mill to actually process the wires from the ingot, and to make the ingot we needed the alloy smelter, which we didn't have before. Now that we've actually got the alloy smelter as well, we can make quite a few upgrades to the base, not just with item conduits. The next upgrade that we can actually make to everything is by upgrading our steam dynamos there with new augments for like actual steam processing. And you do that with the boiler conversion and the turbine conversion augments. Basically, you have one boiler for every 2 turbines. The alloy smelter is helpful because it gives you fused quartz, which is what you need for the boiler conversion, and, well, only the boiler conversion. It's important that we get all of these hoppers replaced with item conduits because there have been multiple instances where they'll get backed up with resources, so I guess the main question we should be asking is how do we get pulsating dust for pulsating iron? And well, you get it basically from uraninite this early on. There is the other recipe, like resonant clathrate, but that is not really accessible for much later on, and this one's pretty much worthless. And to get uraninite, you basically just have to go mining for it. Either that, or you go and use your quarters to actually get the resource. Which is, of course, the shortcut that we're going to be taking because, well, I do not have the patience to go looking for another one of those veins right now. I remember the pain of looking for those. Alright, and now we've got all of our uraninite smelted up, and now, once again, we've got to smelt it down into the dust. Alright, and there's all of the pulsating dust we need. Well, not all of it, but definitely more than enough. Oh, and that was a quest too, actually. Yeah, we also got the steel quest earlier, but I'm pretty sure that was just because I had gotten it from the Lost Cities earlier. Yeah, I didn't actually make that. Our first couple ingots of pulsating iron, and this should be more than enough to get us our first, like, item conduits. Oh, and that's a quest too. And just like that, the one hopper setup that we made for our, like, dynamos over here is pretty much worthless now. And, well, another quest. So instead of having to use 6 hoppers for this entire thing, we can just use literally 4 item conduits. Okay, that is a lot of sugarcane. So pretty much we're just going to connect up the item conduits like this, and they do try to connect to any like interface, like any like storage pretty much. The main thing to know though is that conduits basically work on channels, which is like these colors here. So green is one channel, so you can extract on green and insert on green, and everything will be like processing on that one channel. Which is why we have everything set to red here, so it extracts on red, and then it'll insert on red to all of these dynamos here. The important reason why you should never use green is because it's the default setting. So when you're making a new system and it connects to all of the storage interfaces, it's going to be set to green. Which is really bad if you have it extracting as always active, because then it's going to flood your storage system with things you don't want. Alright, and that's all the filters set except for the basic drawer here, and the main reason I held this one off is because I wanted to showcase that the channels are incredibly important, and that you can have separate channels on the same conduit here. So basically, this entire row here will extract and insert on white, and it inserts into the drawer on white, and then it extracts on red into the steam dynamos, so that way we can have one conduit here, instead of having to have an extra one here in order to put all of the stuff inside. So now that we've got these augments, it's finally time to once again redesign the dynamos. Alright, and behold the brand new improved steam dynamo setup. So how this works is it's like an actual steam setup. So you produce actual steam in this dynamo, and then these two are turbines that actually process the steam into power. And we still have the same filter on the back for red, so it extracts from the drawer. And then for these inserters, since you can't really put filters on these types of conduits, you have to get the ender type, like a fluid conduit, to actually put filters. So yeah, it's basically just taking the steam from this dynamo and just putting it into these two turbines. And another thing to keep in mind is that you can see like the white little outline there. That is actual steam going through, because if you have water going through, if this will extract, you'll see the blue outline there. It actually like somewhat shows the fluid. Make sure you don't have water going through there, because I thought I had to get a tank made so I could actually get the steam to go into the like dynamos. No, it just had water in the system. So yeah, all we have to really do now is just connect this up, and bam, that is a lot more power being generated. And I mean a lot more. The maximum for this is 160 a tick. So instead of making 10 EU a tick from one dynamo, we actually make 40 EU a tick now. So in total, from 2 dynamos, we are making 80 EU a tick as opposed to 30 EU a tick from the 3 dynamos, which means we can fully support at least 3 machines. No, I'm pretty sure it's just 2 machines for LV. In order to continue progressing through the machines, we have to make 4 even more complicated components now. The first being the electric piston. The next being the conveyor module. After that, we have the electric pump. And lastly, we have the robot arm. So some of these components have secondary uses that you can like place as covers on machines, and we'll get into those when we actually need them. But for now though, the main thing to keep in mind is that these are just components for machines. So to start out with, the electric piston, I'm going to use the steel recipe instead of the raw iron recipe just because it's cheaper. Although technically more expensive, since in order to create steel you need to put raw iron and carbon into an alloy smelter. Thankfully we can use charcoal for this recipe instead of coal or anything else, because it's just cheaper that way. Mash it up here in the work table. Now we can make some steel. Not exactly like a large amount, but we should definitely start getting some of this just slowly cooking away in the background while we do the other things. And in order to do that, what I'm going to do is take all of this wood that I've been accumulating for quite some time here and just throw these into the furnaces to get a shit ton of charcoal. Making steel rods and plates is the same as any other material, so there's not really much to worry about there. So in order to make a small steel gear though, what you have to do is just use 1 plate and a hammer, and, well, I forgot a hammer. I guess I'll just be taking the one from the plates. So yeah, that's literally it for the, like, whatchamacallit, the small gear. Just 2 steel for now, instead of, like, a lot more iron, since the raw iron gear takes this recipe. So yeah, either way, we're going to be doing this recipe, and then all we really have to throw in there is just some motors and tin cables, and we've got our first piston. And the quest too. Now that we've got the piston, there's 2 new machines we need to make, which is the compressor for one of them, and the other one is the macerator. So the compressor recipe uses 2 pistons, but surprisingly doesn't use any circuits. Let's make sure to get this placed down so that way we can get plates made a lot easier. So basically it's a 1-to-1 ratio for plates now. A lot better. Now to craft the macerator, you do once again need circuits, but you need a buzz saw this time, which requires quite a few like tools. So you need the wire cutter, hammer, wrench, and file, so make sure you've got those on you. And you once again use that piston and buzz saw to make your macerator. Well, we once again get this placed to the end of the line here, although we're going to need to get another cable. Thankfully, that's something that we can do literally in my inventory, and we need 4x cable in order to like extend this wire, so we'll just make another one like so. Something you might be confused about, since I was talking about amperage earlier this video and I said you could only have 4 machines running at the same time on a cable, why do I have 5 machines on the cable? Well, that's because they need to be running at the same time. These 5 machines aren't running at the same time, so it's not going to kill the power. But once they start running more than 4, that's when it kills it. So make sure you keep a close eye on what's running so you don't accidentally do that. Back to the macerator though, the main reason we wanted this was so that we could more easily crush up recipes instead of having to use this mortar here. So the next component we're going to craft is the conveyor module, which we craft with rubber sheets, electric motors, and a tin cable, which once again isn't the craziest recipe, though I need to get more rubber. Alright, now we've got some more rubber sheets, so we should be able to craft this, and there's my motors and one conveyor module to go. The next component to craft is the electric pump, which is a lot more of an involved recipe, as you can see. So the first thing we need is electric motors. We also need tin cables, and we're going to take some out of this since we don't really have much left. We need paper rings, tin rotor, a tin screw, and bronze pipes. Considering the fact we keep needing more rings, I think the first thing we're going to do is make a new work table for that. So in order to make a paper ring, you need paper and a knife. And in order to make a knife, we're just going to take a stick and flint because I'm lazy. So we'll quite simply just craft our knife in the crafting. Did I actually just... Okay, well, we've got our knife. We'll get some sugarcane from over here to make some paper. And just like that, we should be able to make quite a few rings. And bada boom, bada bing. The next two things I think I want to work on is the tin screw and rotor, since we've done those before. Now, the very last component to the electric pump is the bronze pipe, which literally is just 6 bronze plates. The difficult part is bronze, although it's not really difficult. You just need 3 copper and 1 tin to get 4 ingots, so we just need to do that twice. Now time to make the last component of our pump, which is the bronze pipes, which thankfully isn't too difficult. You just really need 3 components in total. And now we make our pump, which is not... Oh, wait, no we can't. We need, what? A wrench? And a screwdriver. Okay, at least I have that in my bag. Now we get the pump. The very last component I want to make is the robot arm, which isn't too bad, all things considered. At least in comparison to the pump, it is definitely not too bad. So we need tin cables, we need circuits for that, we need more motors, and we need a piston as well. Ooh dear, okay, we are short 1 piston. Okay, hopefully we've got all the resources to make a piston. Okay, now we do, and we should be able to make this, or at least get close to it. What are we missing? Okay, 2 steel rods. Oh, I don't think we have any steel left over, do we? Okay, I gotta cook up more steel. You know, this isn't going nearly as according to plan as I was hoping. Okay, there. With the 2 steel, we should be able to have enough for the 2 rods we need in order to make 1 mechanical arm, I believe. Or no, robot arm. Yeah, we have just enough for 1. As far as I know, that should be every component that we needed to get. Yeah, that is pretty much every important component. I think at this point in the quest line, what I want to try to do is get the blast furnace here before the end of the episode. And in order to get the blast furnace, we need to get both copper, nickel, and invar, which is both 2 alloys you can make in the alloy smelter. In order to make invar, what you need is nickel and iron, and it's 2 iron and 1 nickel for 3, and to make copper and nickel, it's, well, copper and nickel. So, time to just get a bunch of iron, nickel, and copper and to just smelt it all up. We're going to need quite a few stacks if I recall correctly. So while the alloys process in the background, in order to make a blast furnace, we basically have to construct a multi-block instead of just one, block for a machine. You need the invar for the green layer here. It takes a lot of invar for these components. These 2 orange layers are just copper nickel, and then there's just more invar for the top. Well, here's our first stack of invar. So in order to craft the actual controller itself, you need a couple furnaces, circuits, tin cables, and heat-proof machine casing. And this is the main part where the invar comes in, and you need any type of invar frame color, but the shapeless, or not shapeless, the random invar frame that just materializes in there, it never wants to give you the non-dyed version, so you just look it up here, and that's the actual recipe. Alright, and now we've got a stack of copper nickel as well, and this should also be the quest. Yeah, let's go! Oh, and we also get another quest for cobalt. Oh, and nickel. So now that we've got these alloys out of the way, the next thing we need to do is make the actual blast furnace, which as you can see takes quite a few components. So the main thing you need is the actual controller block for the blast furnace. You need 16 coil blocks for the middle. You need 2 LV hatches, an input bus, an output bus, a fluid hatch, and an output hatch as well for the fluids. And then your heat-proof casing to actually have as the exterior, if you remember. The reason why you need these input and output hatches here is because the actual controller doesn't allow you to just throw things in like a normal machine. You have to actually use the buses here, like the input and output buses, in order to put items in and get them out. The reason why you've got fluid hatches is because for something like annealed copper, let's say, you need oxygen for that, which is a fluid, so you have to throw in like that into your fluid input hatch. Well, either way though, these aren't really too complicated. It's basically just 6 machine holes for us to get everything here. Now that we know what we're going to be building, let's start crafting. Alright, well the very last craft we should have to make should be the actual blast furnace controller, if I recall. And here we go. That should be the quest now. Now that we've got all of the components, how do we actually construct the actual blast furnace? Well, the important thing to remember is that it's a 3x3, and you've got 2 input hatches, and we want those close to the wires, so we're going to place those there. We're pretty much just going to be placing this right at the end of the entire row here, just so it's easier for me. At least cheaper in resources anyways. And since, yeah, this is a 3x3, so we want to have heat proofing wherever there's like empty space in the bottom here. And we actually want our input and output buses on the bottom, so it's just easier to see them. So input and output. Then the next 2 rows are your cupro-nickel coil blocks, and you want to keep the center hollow. If you actually go into the diagram here, you can click through. Oh no, that's actually, you have to click this, and then you can see how there's like a hole in the center there. So yeah, we just want to complete this like with the cupro-nickel, and then we've got our last row here, which we'll want to place a fluid and output hatch as well. And that's the multi-block. And yeah, something to keep in mind is the hatches or whatever will actually like blend into the actual invar block with the multi-block. And the placement of all of these hatches is not exactly like determinate or anything. You can place them anywhere you want, facing any direction. These holes here are like your outputs practically. So if I'm remembering this correctly, what this should do is it should be pulling from like input buses with that like hole there. It should be pulling from interfaces, and then this output should be like outputting into interfaces. If I put iron into here, yeah, it immediately gets sucked up into the input bus. The very last thing to mention about the blast furnace is the reason why we have 2 LV hatches instead of just 1. And the main reason for that is because a lot of the recipes, especially for the main resource we're going to be needing for MV power, is like aluminum. It takes 120 EU a tick, which, as you can recall, is a bit more than LV since that goes up to 32 EU a tick. Essentially what this is doing is it's transforming up from LV power to MV power, like basically with a way higher power draw though. So instead of pulling out 32 EU a tick, it'll actually be pulling out 128 for MV power. So because of that, it is incredibly important to keep in mind that your steam dynamos here aren't exactly like foolproof for this. And the main reason they're not foolproof is especially because aluminum takes 120 EU a tick, while these only produce 80 EU a tick. These 2 steam dynamos just can't cut it alone. So you've got 2 options. You can either improve your power supply so you produce enough power to actively supply your blast furnace, or you can get some batteries in order to have a buffer up so you don't actually drain all your energy. While it would probably be a smart idea to make batteries and start getting a buffer at this point, I think it would be a better idea to just improve the dynamos instead. Although unfortunately, I think that's going to have to be a project for next episode. So as of right now, the things we need to do is improve our power situation. We need to keep expanding our machine infrastructure because there are still more things we can make to help improve our situation. And also just keep going through the quests because we are getting quite close to DML and Applied Energistics 2, which is just free resources and storage. Well, thank you all so much for watching this video. Hopefully next time things go just as smoothly as this one. Until then, I'll see you next one.